Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective, and then the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with the biblical worldview. Again, if you like the show you've been listening, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button or leave a review. That'll let others know the show's worth listening to. Certainly help us advance the cause of Christian education. Today's extra credit version of the Clearly Christian Podcast is a deeper dive into those chalkboard points from our recent conversation with Dr. Collette House, the Superintendent of Aurora Christian Schools in Aurora, Illinois. The full episode is live, so just look for the picture of Dr. Collette House. So now for some extra credit, let's go ahead and dive in. And at this time, let me bring in our producer, Brian Lefelock. And so I just want to talk with him about what he might have heard during that particular episode. And is there anything that you think the listeners may want to explore a little bit more? So Brian, what'd you think? What'd you hear?
I think, Dr. Smith, the very first thing that I heard was when you talked about the political nature and the political environment that we're in. And I'm interested in your thoughts. When you talk about political character or even character of all of us, everyone's fighting now. Why, even outside of politics, why are we attacking each other so much now when we didn't used to do that?
Right, exactly. I think fundamentally that's going to go back to, at least on some level, some kind of common conception of what was right and true across different groups and people and age ranges, from kids to teenagers to adults to senior citizens. We definitely had a little bit more in common in terms of thinking, yep, this is an absolute standard of right and wrong. This is definitely true. We may have differences of opinion, no doubt about it, but we're going to draw a line on some of these same things in same places. For instance, back in those debates, like you said, there were times when certainly Bush and Clinton disagreed, but they were never going to cross this line. You knew that Clinton wouldn't cross that line, Bush wouldn't cross that line, Reagan wouldn't cross that line, Carter wouldn't cross that line. In other words, this was right. And if I'm at all waffling, I'm not going to bring this up because I'm not sure if this is accurate or not. And so there definitely was a little bit more to some degree of a common conception of this is right, this is wrong. And when you remove that in a society, which we've just seemed like the whole thing has broken down, nobody's willing to call anything right and wrong, right? That's why these kids have so much trouble trying to figure out how they should live, is because you say this, I say that, and they say things like, well, what's true for you may not be true for me. And they hear that and they go, what? Well, then what is true? I thought true had to be true. If A is true and then B can't be true, you don't get to say, no, B's true for me. And so kids wrestle with these big philosophical things and they go, is she right or is he right? And they're both saying they're right. Would somebody tell me what's right?
And do you think, not to get too political, but I think it's important. We're talking about leadership here, and this is the leadership series, the third in the episode of the series. These are our leaders. So when you ask who's your leader, our political leaders, the President of the United States has always been, the most powerful person in the world. Is the way they're behaving affecting the young people? You talk about consistency and credibility. I mean, is it now okay just to rip on each other?
It's going to come back to bite us for sure. And I think it already is, because young people on both sides have said, I don't trust these people. Yeah. I don't know what to believe. I don't trust them. And so even if this person wins, I'm not going to follow their lead because I don't trust that what they're saying is actually true. And so I can't move forward there. So I'm always going to resist the leader because I just don't trust them. And young people, boy, when they lose trust and confidence, I think all of us are like that, but especially kids, right? And they're going to do that with their national leaders as well. They're just going to resist going in the direction that they need to go. And then what's going to happen, to be even more philosophic and historical, is if you're the leader and people won't follow you because they don't trust you, and yet you still want your way, what do? You have to bring down the hammer. And then you end up having to use force. And that's a bad thing for a country. When you have to force your people to follow, bad things happen. Just see Europe for about 2,000 years.
So another thing I was interested in when Dr. House brought up the idea of being the same Collette and always being consistent in her ways of being leadership when she walks into the room. Is that hard for a leader? Talk to leaders about a little bit deeper about, and you have hard days and things come up and things go wrong, and yet you always have to play that role. You mentioned being in the grocery store and always having to be the superintendent. How can a leader be more consistent in how they
Yeah, that was a great point. I'm glad she brought that up because I do not think people realize that, and I think they underestimate that. And she said it well. You can be authentic and you can be transparent, and it sounds like she really takes pride in that in her school, wants to be relational and things like that. Yet she still recognizes, nope, I don't have the freedom to walk out of my office every day in the hallway and look like I've had a terrible day. Nope, you don't have that luxury because you are, especially if you're the superintendent or the head of school, you could have an awful day and you're just walking down the cafeteria or something like that, and you're going to see somebody who maybe hasn't seen you in 3 or 4 days, and you're going to pass him in that hallway. And I don't care if your dog just died, right? You're going to need to smile and you're going to need to say hello, and you're going to need to exude confidence. And that person may just walk by and get a hello and a how are you doing, if that, but you need to make them feel like everything's okay because he's just fine. She's just fine. Are you having a good day? Yep. And like I said, you just have to at times bury those things. And especially publicly, you're going to have to do that. That's why they say, it's lonely at the top. And I know it's a cliche, but it is true because there's times when you can bring in that small inner circle of confidence, whether it's your assistant or it's a board or something like that. Yeah, you can unload on them. And you need men and women, maybe your spouse when you go home, you need men and women that you can unload on and really be real with. But you had better keep the public in mind. And I don't want to sound so superficial and say, keep your public image up and be all high. And no, don't hear what I'm not saying. Don't exaggerate that too much. But again, what she said is so true. And what Mueller writes is true. Trust and confidence have to enter with you. And they're not going to enter with you if they think that you're walking out there going, when the sky is falling, because every day is full of problems. We deal with humans who are prone to making mistakes, including the leader. And so we're all there. So you're going to have issues. Every day could be bad, but how do you choose to respond to that? And do you carry that forward for your team?
And then finally, you were mentioning the idea about character and credibility and the fact that you can earn credibility and you can lose it too. I have to assume, put words in your mouth, it's a whole lot easier to lose it, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And most writers will tell you, that it's so sad that you can spend a career working hard to earn it. And then in just the blink of an eye, all is lost. And it's tragic. And I think we've all lived long enough to say that, be careful when you talk about that, because that's usually when you get attacked the most, right? Is when you think I'm above that, or, oh no, that would never happen to me, or this, that, and the other. And many a leader has fallen from that position. Because you can lose that credibility pretty quick when those people lose trust and something's not matching up here, right? Your convictions and your behavior are not matching up. So it can plummet pretty fast.
And let me ask one more question. At the end of the show, you and Dr. House were talking about the idea of the pendulum swinging. You talked about school choice and grants and things in most states, obviously not where she is yet. But that things are improving, things are changing. It's palpable, tangible. What do you tell leaders and teachers who want to get into the profession of teaching now, or maybe are leaving the profession teach? It's a rough place now. What do you tell them about that pendulum? Is that a real thing that's going to impact change quickly?
Right. I think so. It's happening a little faster than we thought because the other side is happening faster than what we thought. So Christians are responding with like swiftness for the first time, really historically, because down when you look the last 50, 60 years and certain things happened that were really, tough to work through as a culture, Christians were slow to respond. Well, now things are happening so fast on the left and so moving in the wrong direction that Christians are following, that same pattern. And it's coming pretty quick. I would say be optimistic. Stay in the game. your chances of making impact are going to be very, very great. So don't, now is not the time to jump ship. Stay with it. And I think you're going to like where we're going. It's going to be a fight though. You're going to have to have some courage, some resilience, and some strength, but you'll be okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate your questions. It's been good. And thank you for listening to the extra credit version of the Clearly Christian podcast. And I hope that now, again, you know more about credibility and character. And it's been a good conversation today. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.